Hello, and welcome to Latinx YC, where we discuss all things related to U.S. politics from a Latino, Latina, and Latinx perspective. My name is Clemencia Herrera, and I'm founder of Moira Studio, an advertising agency that works in political and advocacy campaigns that target Latinx.
And I'm Cecilia del Cid, Ceci, environmental and social justice practitioner, Latin American and immigrant community weaver, and I work in media as well.
Hello, Ceci.
Hola, mi amor.
And we have a really special guest today. We're really excited to have her. Her name is Helen Torres, and for the past 20 years, she's been the CEO of HOPE, Hispanas Organized for Political Equality, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization committed to ensuring political and economic parity for Latinas through leadership, advocacy, and education to the benefit of all communities and the status of women for the past 30 years. And to date, HOPE's innovative programming has served 58,000 Latinas, that's a lot, and touched the lives of several thousand more through their advocacy efforts. So basically, all things we love. Thank you so much, Helen, for being
Gracias,
here.
Helen, welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm enjoying the love, and thank you so much for your leadership and having such an incredible podcast that represents our community.
Thank you.
Yay, thank you. So Helen is joining us today because we're going to be covering a really important topic, which we'll probably keep touching upon over and over again in more episodes because it's just so important. And it is representation. And what better expert to talk about representation than Helen?
Yes.
So, Helen, tell us a little bit about why you decided to get involved with HOPE and why you think representation is so important. Let's talk about that.
Yes, absolutely. The reason I started becoming involved in HOPE was, as you noted, I've been part of the organization as its CEO, executive director for almost 21 years now. And before that, though, I was a volunteer with the organization. My background is I'm a Puerto Rican from Michigan, which is always very interesting to say. When I was in Detroit, when we were growing up in Detroit, there was a very vibrant Latino community. But when my parents moved out to the suburbs, there wasn't. And that really was a glimpse for me about how difficult it was for my mother to assimilate, to be accepted. She was very politically active on the island in Detroit. But when she really was surrounded with individuals that questioned her being here, why she came here, and really felt that discrimination even in the workplace, I really saw her taking a step back. And quite honestly, it punctured her soul, right? It takes a little bit out of all of us when you feel like you don't belong. But she worked really hard to make sure that my sister and I had a good footing in the United States, that we not only learned the language, but that we went on to succeed. And one of the first things I wanted to do was move to an area where it was predominantly or as close as possible to a majority Latino community. And Los Angeles became my home after college. I started working in public relations and started hearing about this great organization called HOPE, Hispanas Organized for Political Equality. And very quickly, at that point, the organization was 100% volunteer run. It was really on the backs, if you will, of these great founders who had a vision for Latina leadership, not only in Los Angeles, but in California and now nationally. And as I volunteered, I just fell in love with the organization's mission. And it really, to me, was the answer to how to create an inclusive community where Latinas shine and where Latinas are accepted, but even more than being accepted, where Latinas are seen too, as we know is the fact in our families, as the leaders that we are. So as soon as there was an opportunity to become the executive director and CEO of HOPE, I went for it. I was 31 years old, had no idea what it meant really, and but it's been a great success, I believe, since then.
It's so beautiful to see how things that happen throughout our lives have really, we've been able to turn crisis and pain into something fruitful and productive and something that actually helps others. That's such a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that with us. So,
and I will say we also are ready to not have to struggle all the time. Because I think that there is a lot of that, like, you know, this idea that we have grit and that is what makes us, and that we've survived, resilient. I was like, yes, and I am ready to live in a place where I don't have to spend all my energy surviving.
Yeah. So there's still a long way to go, unfortunately, but you know, this grit is that we have it's exterior, and we have feelings too, and you know, but we keep going. We're very curious, since you are so involved in it, and also you guys work with so many Latinas that are involved in leadership and political positions. How has the political environment for Latinas evolved ever since you started working with Hope?
You know, I love this question for a variety of reasons, because it really matches the environment in which we're in right now, where everyone needs to look at our history, right? And our history as Latina leaders, not so much just in our family, because we've always known that, right? And we've always known throughout history there have been these incredible women in our community that perhaps aren't recognized for their leadership, but have really done incredible things to move the cause of feminism and Latinaness moving forward, right, in a very positive way. But in the larger sense, there is, you know, throughout United States history, this time in the 1960s that I think is really important as a reflection point, where especially in the United States, Mexican Americans and Puerto Ricans and others and throughout the country were finding a battle call, if you will, to rise up and to have a stronger political voice. It doesn't mean that it wasn't there in different times, but you really do see a collective movement happening in the 60s, which makes a lot of sense of everything that was happening in our community.
Right.
And the reason, and just in the United States, period. And the reason that's so important, because oftentimes that question for me when being asked is followed up around like, why haven't Latinas advanced faster? What is it? Like it's almost like it's our fault.
Yeah,
somehow.
that's such a charged question.
And I remind people that, first of all, women, when I say women, I mean predominantly white women, didn't get the right to vote until 100 years ago.
That's right.
And Latinas and African American women really didn't have that right until the 1960s. So you're talking about a community that was not engaged directly in the political process. Not only were they not engaged from, people saying come along, but they were told that they can't be, right? And there was a lot of barriers. So when you're thinking about somewhat of our modern political history, you're talking really about the 1960s till now. So when you look at that perspective, and we still say, gosh, Congress is only 22% is Latinas, then we're not surprised by that number. We're not surprised by the fact that there is a big, heavy lift when it comes to political participation, regardless of ethnicity and race, because people often don't want to be involved in politics, right? From the get-go, regardless of your race. I mean, you have to remember, traditionally in the United States, voting is at 50 to 60%, right? Regardless of race or ethnicity or gender. So this isn't a country that, even though we love embracing democracy, I love embracing democracy, we really don't provide great pathways to it. And nor do we at times really celebrate that as being part of this larger society. So with that all in, as a background, I'm excited about the way that we have moved forward. And especially as Latinas, since the 1990s till now, I would say, I feel like we've been, working that grassroots, right? And Cece, I love what you said, it's been a lot of work, right? And we have to show up with a lot of grit. But I do feel like it's paying off.
Yes.
But we're not at the finish line. We're probably not even halfway there. But I do believe that we've been kind of creating these incredible infrastructure to take us to the finish line. And when you're building that up, it can't be led by one individual, one organization. It is a community effort.
Yes.
And that's why I love working at Hope, because that's the approach that we take. That's the philosophy that we take, is that to really enhance this democracy, to make it a perfect union, we all have to be a part of it. So Latinas not only have to step up, but they do have to show up with a lot of grit, right? And they have to come on with their sledgehammer and break down those barriers. It's not fair, but it's the reality.
No, and I think when I hear you speaking, and I think as an immigrant who has been here for only like 2/3 of those last 30 years, and we think of the 90s, and only like 2/5 of the last 50, we think of the 60s, 70s. Think of Dolores Huerta, and when I think of like her true like leadership example, her role as a woman, how the farm workers movement begins to connect with the civil rights movement, with the Native American movement, with the labor movement, with feminism, and we begin to and I think for Latinas specifically, for many women of color, you begin to see what intersectionality does at keeping us in the margins. At what does it mean to not just have gender, but to also have race, to have ethnicity, and to then have class? And that keeps, for every layer that that compounds, it keeps pushing you out. So I totally appreciate you giving us that historical context, because as someone who has been here, as I said, for the last 20 years, learning that history is really important, because not all of us, when we first get here, understand that kind of framework.
Yeah, and understand all the work that has been done. We're sort of like riding on the backs of all the people that have just done so much work in the past. And but it's true, when you were saying, Helen, that we're still not even halfway there, but I was actually having a conversation about this with somebody else today, saying I always keep feeling like we're paving the way for something really exciting, and it's like we are, all of us together are working towards something really awesome that's gonna be, maybe we might not see it in our lifetimes, but it really does feel like we're just, building something very strong, and then hopefully other people can ride on our backs for all the work that we've done. So it's I love that perspective, definitely. So I always think about in two ways. I visualize it. I visualize it as a relay race, and that's why I love that Hope has youth programming, because we have to not only take care of ourselves and make sure that we don't feel like we have to carry all the brunt in the battle, right? There's plenty of people to recruit in a strong team. But even after there's a strong infrastructure built, as we have seen, that infrastructure can start crumbling if you don't build the next generation to take care of it and build upon it. And so it is that relay race, right? Where it's a race that's never ending, unfortunately, but at the same time, you have to find the joy in running the race and making sure that we're passing that baton. And I think about how we create Hope's programming around that, where we have leadership training almost at every level of a Latina's development. If it's high school, college, mid-career, and at the executive level, so that there's constant peers that can support you through your next phase, and that there's opportunities for you to grow in your leadership and your civic leadership as well, right?
And that I think is so incredibly important to do, is to not only take time to grow your own leadership, but to help others and your peers, and to really kind of create this team mentality of how are we supporting each other to enter into this marathon relay race that we're in.
Love that. So, you mentioned that, it's just been, since the 60s that we've been able to vote, let alone get involved in politics, like run for office or something like that. What do you think are the main challenges right now? So if we were to say, hey, we're making a call for everyone or for Latinas to run for office, what do you think are the main challenges right now that Latinas are facing when they actually want to run for office or be in a leadership position in the political realm?
Specifically to running for office, and if you have a commission appointment, and we have to remember commissioners in certain states and in certain localities have a lot of power, right? If you're a commissioner on the Utilities Commission, especially here in California, that's a lot of power. Think about literally power, right? Because you're talking about electricity, water, everything that goes through regulations through that commission. So I think it's always important to remember that both of those, either if it's political or, if you're running for office or serving on a commission, it's about your social networks. And who do you know? Who knows you? Who knows you that they could be your champion to get you to those individuals that are either the decision makers in your community when it comes to commissions. It could be the governor if it's the statewide, or mayors and city councils at the local level. So what are your relationships that can get you in front of these individuals that make these decisions? And then for elected office is your network of, and we always break it down into threes, right? Your workers, your wealth builders, and your wisdom people, right? So who in your network meets aspects of that? Who in your network has the wealth, or at least the connection to wealth, to help you raise money? Who in your network has the wisdom, and hopefully you're part of this too, that really could put together a strong strategy to run a campaign in your community? And then who are the workers who are going to knock the doors for you and say, gosh, you really have to vote for Clemencia, right? So, and that is all social capital. That is all networking and building up that network. And oftentimes Latinas don't think they have that. But if they take that moment to really look at their Christmas list, for example, or their graduation list, like who attended your quinceañera, if you want to go back that far, right? And just say, who were these people? How am I connected to them? And even expand beyond that. We start really taking note and stock about how wealthy, and I mean that not in the dollar sense, I mean that in the abundance sense, our networks really are. And I think that sometimes seems to seem like a strong barrier to running for office. But I think we need to flip that script on that and really think about, how do we define our networks and who are we adding to them, right? Who are the allies we're bringing in? And I think that is something that as Latinas, we need to just start taking a different look and outlook about. So that we're not looking at it from a deficit, but actually from a very positive place.
So you're really taking into account the social capital more. I guess, this is something I read recently in a book, but a comment something like political campaigns continue to be popularity contests. And if we think about what does it mean to have those networks and to have the ability to network like that, how are we building a stronger kind of if you look at within those networks, to have a little more content beyond just I think that if I think of me as a progressive or someone who wants someone who if I'm going to dedicate my time either in knocking doors or making phone calls, to look beyond about, because I think a lot of that social capital has been constructed, at least in this country and in many of our countries, through generational wealth and generational systems of like oppression, and people who have like definitely know how to harness this power and like have like, I don't know, amass it. So yeah, that would be like kind of like my follow-up to say like, yes, we do have these huge social networks. We are comadres and tias and abuelitas, and we are, you know, this village that helps, like we're there, we support each other. And how do we move to like not just the popularity contest, but like to more substance? I'm sure we have done that.
From my point of view, in the political advertising realm, you have to be popular not just with other Latinos. You know, like non-Latinos are trying to vote for you too. So the social network doesn't just have to, it cannot just be Latinos.
Yes.
You know, and you also have to be in contact with people in positions of power, which may be a drawback. They say, oh, I don't really know any white Americans in positions of power or something like that. You know, that may be something that may hold some people back. But ultimately, in my mind, all of that sounds like self-doubt, right? You know, if you're doubting your own social network, or you're doubting, you know, your own capabilities of like, you know, gathering people around what you believe in, it's just self-doubt a little bit sometimes. So I don't know what you guys think.
You know, there's a lot around confidence and the need for confidence. When we first established the program that we're best known for, our Hope Leadership Institute, which is a 9-month, pretty extensive 5-session program for Latinas right now, currently in California. We have about 600 alumni. We've been doing this program for 21 years. When we did the focus groups to go to funders to say, you know, this program's needed and it needs to be specific to Latinas. And they said, well, there's all these other programs that do leadership training and whatnot, but why specifically to Latinas? So we had to prove why specific to Latinas. And one of the key reasons that we heard from Latinas that we were talking about was that they didn't have spaces where they can ask the dumb questions and not feel like it would take away from who they were as a leader, right? They couldn't show up to the chamber meeting and ask certain questions that were very kind of secondhand to other people because their families were part of the chamber, or, you know, that was just the way that they did business. So they wanted this space. And so that's one thing about the incredible thing about social networks, and in creating space where you can ask those questions that you need to ask, but also, to your point, Clemencia, also including other allies to help you along, because you're not going to, there's some districts across the United States where you can just win with the Latino vote. But if you have higher aspirations, you know, from going from a city council race to, you know, if it's an assembly race or a state senate race, let alone a U.S. Senate race, you have to have a very well thought out coalition to help you with that, right? And that's where allies are really important. But at the same time, the confidence is important. And what we heard from the women was, and these were all extremely what we would say successful women, right? They had, or how society would sometimes say success, right? They were educated with a bachelor's degree or more. They had 5+ years of being acknowledged as community leaders in their community, right? So they already had a brand, if you will, of being a community leader or a thought leader in their community. And they still felt like that was not enough, because how they saw political office was like this big, like you have to be the best of the best. And yes, that's what we always hope for all our elected officials. But let's just be very honest. Democracy is made up of everyone's participation. And one of the easiest thing about running for a political office is there is, besides a fee of like maybe $100 or whatever the fee may be in your community, anyone can file to run for office. You know, you have to meet the the citizenship and the age limitations in some communities. Some don't have quite as much as we think they do, right? So, but anyone can file for office. So why do we put this self-imposed kind of barrier of, oh no, I can't do it until I have my master's degree or my law degree, because we're making legislation, so we should be super, intelligent and all
prepared.
This. That's not the way that most men approach running for office.
No.
Right? And I think that's really important to distinguish that. I love that that's how us as Latinas think about how we need to prepare for the world, but it shouldn't be a barrier to getting involved in elected office or getting out there and seeing yourself as a leader. You can't say, I am going to, in my own mind, recognize myself as a leader until I get that master's degree or until I get that promotion. Because we need you. You can't put those self-imposed barriers in your own life.
We hold ourselves to such high standards all the time, and we're so hard on ourselves.
Right.
But I don't know if they're self-imposed. I think that even when you think of like president, the first Black president of this country, he acknowledged that he had to show up and be twice as good as any white man. And as women, you have to be twice as good as any man, and you have to be twice, then 3 or 4 times as good, because if you're a person of color, and if there is if you're a member of the LGBTQ community, so yes, they're like, we have maybe internalized some of those messages, but I think that there's some very real, systemic barriers that are there.
Right, and I think that's very fair. I think that's very fair to say. But I guess what I'm saying, what I'm trying to add is, let's not be part of those barriers.
Yeah. That I totally agree.
Let's acknowledge what they are, but how do we overcome them without us putting more on top of that? If that makes sense.
Totally.
And I think that is important to think about. Of course, Latinas have to do a lot more. There's a lot to be discussed around how we even take praise and how we give praise, how we internalize a lot of this. And I think that's why it's so important to have peers that can be your champions, that could be your strong advisors, and really provide, once again, that wisdom to help you through to the next stage of your civic engagement. That's why I think it's so important to have organizations like HOPE that provide those networks, because you're going to go out there and you're going to get beat up. But it's nice to come to a safe place where they're like, hey, I got beat up too, and this is how I got over it, and this is where we're going to, and this is how we're going to, thrive. This is how we're going to move forward. Or you're going to come back and say, wow, I was successful this way. And you're going to share that knowledge and share those stories. But at the end of the day, there's no ifs, ands about it. If we want to see real, true representation, really getting at this, that's probably going to be through legislation. Okay. I don't see that happening anytime soon in this country. I think it's really interesting that other countries have tried out quotas of having X amount of men and women in their government, and that has worked, and then sometimes has not worked, because then certain classes just use that as ways to get their wives, quite frankly, unfortunately, in roles that perhaps is not what we were intending. But, people always say, oh, we shouldn't have quotas in the United States. And I think it's so hilarious because we're based on quotas, right?
Yeah.
We have a certain number that representatives in Congress. We say that every state, regardless of population size, only gets 2 U.S. senators.
There's a census.
So we're based on quotas. But if we're talking about fair representation, honestly saying, how are we going to get it down to from thinking about fair representation, some people estimate it's going to take us over 150 years. That's not going to happen unless there's legislation. So that's the reality. But the reality is also legislation like that's not going to get passed. So what do we do instead? And that's where I think being very forthright and purposeful about how we define our roles in civic engagement in the United States is really important. And I always say, people always ask me, Helen, are you thinking of running for office? I go, not yet. Because I think all of us should run for office, should have that experience. There is magic in the numbers, right, Clemencia? When we look at our social media and everything, you've got to have massive people showing up. And so if we're going to change those numbers, all of us just going to have to take that risk and run for office. I always say that's going to be my retirement plan, right? When I'm 65 years old, I'm old enough that I can't embarrass my children directly because they're adults and they're in their own lives. And I'm going to be probably a lot more full of confidence to just say it how it is. But for other women, they're going to find that voice much sooner. And we need to support them in that. But I think, if we're talking about it, we have to have a massive movement of every Latina thinking, when and what office are they going to eventually run for? And I don't care if it's dog catcher. We all need to be at every level of government because that's really how we create change.
I love that. And you said something that really struck me just a little bit ago. You said, we need us. And,
right.
I know why, but I want to hear why you think that is, because I want the people in the back to hear it.
Yeah.
I think the reason we need us is, there's, Clemencia, that if you mean like why we need to be supportive of each other,
why we need to run for office, why?
Oh, well, first of all, from a value standpoint, I say that because I believe in democracy. I really do. I believe that having a strong democracy is the cornerstone of why a lot of people come to the United States. It's the reason that we feel free to a degree in the United States, right? And we can have those conversations. And a democracy only works when people are involved, they're engaged. And we need each other. We need us, the Latino community, that is the second largest community of people in the United States, all in for democracy and that value of it. Because if we opt out, and oftentimes we do because we're discouraged, we're told that we shouldn't, we're made feel like we don't belong. But we've got to figure out a way to always push those negativities aside and rise above it, because we're here. If we really believe in this democracy, we've got to show up in big ways. And we've got to let our voices start shaping what the social compact should be. We can't sit out from that. And what I mean by social compact is we're constantly redefining how we're interacting as human beings here in the United States, right? As fellow Latinas, fellow, people from all different races. We have these social compacts, and sometimes they're very formal, that's our laws, and sometimes they're very informal. That's our greetings, our ways that we get along with our neighbors. And if we're not part of those negotiations, we're always going to be left out. We're never going to succeed to the degree that we want to see for all our children.
So you mentioned some of like the youth program for Hope. Tell us a little bit more about other programs that are successful of Hope. What makes a good idea? Like when Hope decides to say, like, we're gonna put our machinery, our infrastructure behind a candidate. How do you go about selecting? How do we encourage people to be like, you know what, maybe I have those characteristics and I should get in touch with Helen Torres and be like, hello,
yes,
look at me.
For all those people out there.
Yeah, so how do we...
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. Yeah, no, I hear you. So I want to be clear too. So Hope is a 501c3. So that means we do not get involved in the electioneering of a specific candidate. So we don't support candidates through money or through, any kind of communication saying you should vote for CC, right? We can't do that. Those are political action committees. But what we do is do the training so that we break down how government works, and we also break down how to run a campaign so that you're armed with the tools. hopefully, because we do this in a peer setting, a social network that will be supportive of you. And then we introduce you to some of the top consultants so that they're exposed to who you are and you can learn from them as well. So that's what we can do as a 501c3. Are you?
I was just going to say, so any member of the community could just like approach and say, I would like to learn more. I would like to become more educated. So there are programs for that within your organization.
Well, we do. They can by attending our larger conferences. Okay. And we're based in California, so a lot of our stuff is in California. We're really taking this time, if you will, to see how we utilize technology such as Zoom and, just being smarter in social media so that these tools can be made available to a lot more individuals. We do have a binational program that's accessible to individuals, but all of those are applications. Okay. And what I mean by that, you do go through a process because they have very specific qualifications that we're looking for. And these are small classes, right? We're talking about 30 women a year. But I think our larger, like our Latina History Day, where last year we had about close to 4,000 viewers. Those are opportunity. That's a great opportunity to engage with the organization and learn. And then I'm always available. Obviously, I can't be available to 4,000 people at one time, unless it is through technology. But I love consulting with people about how they're starting efforts in their local communities, right? And because that's really where it starts, and that's where the magic is. So we're very generous about sharing our curriculum. There's no specific magic to this, right? But it does take work. And so when people are excited and saying, hey, I'd love to learn about how you did the Hope Leadership Institute in California. How do I bring this to Virginia? I'm happy to sit down with someone and just work through what we went through. And then they can really craft it and shape it to what makes sense in their community.
Excellent. Thank you.
I love that. So we are running out of time, but if you out there, listener, want to find out more about Hope, you can go to latinas.org. If you are a sponsor, definitely go to that website. And you want to do a corporate sponsorship, you want to donate, they're doing amazing work. Thank you so much, Helen, for being on the episode today. Such words of inspiration, and I don't know, it's just so, you definitely live hope. There's hope in your voice, which I love.
Can I ask you a question just before we leave? What would be, when you say pie in the sky, what would you like to see, obviously, moving forward in the next 10 years happen?
I see the world through our programs. So I would love to see 100% high school graduation rates for Latinas. I would love to see Latinas leading in the tech world, especially as they're coming out of college, and these innovation hubs of Latina innovators throughout the country, really solving for our next pandemic, our next environmental crisis. I would love to see these innovation hubs of really tapping into what we know is this incredible human capital. And I would love to see a Congress that were at least 15% of the Congress. So if I'm very specific with my measurements, but at the end of the day, what that really translates into is Latinas coming into our power and unapologetically voting for that, showing up to vote for individuals that understand that this country is dependent on the Latina leadership model that we have, right? For our democracy to grow.
Thank you so much.
Love that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, latinas.org. And if you want to find out more about this podcast, you can go to LatinXYZ Pod on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. And if you want to let me know what you thought about this episode or any other episode, you can email me at clem@latinxyzpod.com. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I love the work that you do. Thank you.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much.